Hello everyone and welcome to the British Birthing Stories podcast. Each week I'll be speaking with a different mother about her story of childbirth. Let's get into today's story. Quick one before we dive into today's show. It would be amazing if you could subscribe and follow us on whatever podcast app you listen to your podcasts. And if you have any friends who are expecting mothers, or maybe they're having their second, third, fourth baby, and you think they might want to listen to some stories, it would be incredible if you could pass this on to them. I would be so appreciative. Today we are talking with Katie, who is an independent midwife based in Cornwall. And she had two beautiful home births. One was done through a private midwife and the other one was done through the NHS system. Katie talks so passionately about continuity of care and how she really trusted herself in the birthing process to ultimately have two births that she was so happy with. This is a really great one if you're looking to boost your positivity and have a birth that you really want to have. Hi, Katie. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's great to have you on.
Hi, Georgia. So nice to be here.
Do you want to start off by telling me a little bit about yourself, what you do and who's in your family?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Katie. I am an independent midwife working in Cornwall. So that means I provide care privately, specializing in home births. But first and foremost, I am a mum to two amazing kids. I'm a bit protective of their online safety. So I'm just going to call them Big and Little. Hope that's all right.
Of course.
Also a dog mum. I have a cocker spaniel who you might hear in the background, and a husband.
Lovely. So, Katie, do you want to give us a bit of information about what your first journey to conception was like?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as I was a midwife before I became a mum, and I was always super aware of that kind of thing. My cycles were all over the place, and I got diagnosed with PCOS. Probably when I was about 20 something, and I had my first daughter at 28. So I was pretty concerned that it would be a struggle for me to conceive. I'd started tracking like my cycles, and I bought one of those temperature monitor things, and then tracked it onto a chart. So that's like quite a good way to monitor your fertility, because I didn't know if I was ovulating or not. But we weren't actively trying to conceive at that point. We'd been married for about a year. Just didn't feel right for me. I was like trying to do a PhD at the time. And I fell pregnant with my first child by accident, actually, which was like the most amazing surprise. My first response was a bit of a shock response because I just didn't believe it was going to be that easy for me. But yeah, it was. I was really lucky.
So were you 28 then when you fell pregnant?
Maybe 27, because I think I remember being pregnant and feeling pretty sick on my birthday.
And that must have been a real relief after the journey through PCOS. Were there any other signs aside from your cycle being a bit out of whack that made you think that you had PCOS? Because it's quite a nice early diagnosis, which can be uncommon, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Actually, I think it is quite a common diagnosis. Maybe, actually, I have no idea about the stats, but I know it's something when I share it, lots of other women have had that kind of diagnosis. And it's normally a collection of symptoms. So I think I was suffering from a bit of like hormonal acne on my chin. My cycles were all over the place, and I tend to hold on to a bit of weight. So that was my main thing.
Okay. So then you fall pregnant with your first child. How did that feel? Was your midwife brain on going, 100 miles an hour?
It was, yeah. I think the moment I peed on the stick and saw it, there were two lines. I was just like, oh, fuck. Like, this isn't, oh, wow. I just wasn't expecting it. And I think I told my husband, and that evening, we literally had like half an hour together, and then I went to a hen do. So, and then I had to spend the entire weekend. I didn't really want to tell people. I spent the whole weekend like pretending to drink, but not actually drinking. It was fun. I guess it gave me that little bit of processing time, and maybe that was quite nice for my husband as well, because it was a shock. Although he knew he wanted kids, I think it was useful for him to have the space away from me just to kind of process what I've told him. He's a bit more of like a slow thinker.
Yeah. So were you a private midwife then, or were you thinking you would have a hospital birth? What are you thinking in terms of birth plan? Were you thinking that far ahead?
Yeah, so I was in the NHS at the time, although I was the clinical doctorate. So I was working half of my time in a university doing research, and the other half of my time I was working in a really busy maternity hospital, which was the perfect blend at that stage of my career. But prior to that, I had worked in a couple of different big city hospitals as like a hospital labour ward midwife.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also been part of the home birth team that covered the area that I was having my baby in, which, I mean, that changed me as a midwife forever. I'd always had that kind of approach to birth. I'd always been quite drawn to supporting people having a physiological birth. And like my own mum had had a home birth, so I'd kind of known that story throughout my life. But yeah, being on the home birth team was just incredible. I got to see so many amazing births. A lot of mums who had high risk complications still had their home births, and it went really, really well for them. Mm-hmm. So for me, that was something I knew that I really wanted. But when I left the home birth team to start my PhD, they then disbanded the home birth team. They couldn't recruit midwives into it. So there wasn't like a home birth team for me to book with at that point.
Yeah. What does disbanded mean exactly? You said it's not running.
Yeah. They'd said, we're not going to run this home birth service anymore. We're going to focus our staff in other places.
So what did you do then? What were you thinking?
So I was really lucky. I told my midwife partner that had been my buddy in the home birth team, and she booked my pregnancy. So I think she might have come to my house to do my first booking appointment, which wasn't standard in the area. And then I kept seeing her. I was really lucky that I got to see the same midwife throughout all of my NHS appointments.
So that was all through the NHS, not done privately?
Wow. So I got pregnant in maybe January 2020. Something really big happened then. It was lockdown also came in. I think I was like 1 or 2 weeks post finding out I was pregnant, and then we went into lockdown. So everything was a little bit crazy. I had asked for certain midwives to be on call for my birth, and they'd all agreed to it. But then that was removed by the head of midwifery towards the end of my pregnancy when I was about 34 weeks. So as you can imagine, I was feeling kind of really let down by the system that I was part of, which was a really strange thing for me to be dealing with, because I knew there were certain midwives that I had worked with when I was on the home birth team, standard community midwives, that I wouldn't have felt so comfortable attending me in labour. Maybe they were hadn't attended many births recently. They didn't support home births, or they were very scared. Like, I just knew I didn't want their vibe in my space.
Yeah.
So I went into a bit of a tailspin. And I was lucky enough that there were some really established independent midwives who covered my area. And actually, I'd always seen them as kind of they were quite maverick in my mind as an NHS midwife on a home birth team, which is mad, right? Because we basically do the same thing. But I rang them up and I was like, help, like, what do I do? They can't guarantee who's going to be at my home birth, or even if I can have a home birth at that point, because they were really worried about their ambulances being used in COVID as well. So it was all a bit of a confusing time as a first-time mum, especially when I understood the system so much. But honestly, from the first phone call with the independent midwives, I felt so heard and so understood. It really changed things for me.
And this might just being presumptuous, but you would think that an independent home birth midwife is probably someone who feels quite confident and has quite a few years under their belt, right? So did you also feel that sense of trust and safety, because to be doing something like that, you know, you're going to have the skill set and, I don't know, strength and behind you to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I just knew that I hadn't realized, but I had been searching for like wise women to guide me through this, because it's really hard when you're a midwife. You already kind of, you know so much, but you've also seen what can go wrong. And I needed someone to let me put my guard down and stop being the expert. So, I was the expert in the pregnancy when I was chatting to my mom or some of my friends who weren't midwives, or my partner. And they could just step into that role for me. And it was amazing. I think the moment I really knew that it was worth it is because my independent midwife, I must have been about 37 weeks pregnant. We were having one of the appointments at my house, and she just sat next to me. She looked in my eyes and said, Katie, I know you can do this. And like goosebumps. It was like one of the most powerful things that has ever happened to me. She just said it with such conviction. And then that's when I really started trusting that, like, okay, like, she's a really experienced midwife and she thinks I can do it. So like, of course I can do it. And yeah, I mean, it's giving me goosebumps now just thinking about it. It was so powerful.
I bet. How was your pregnancy then? Do you want to talk us through the kind of first, second, third trimester? Were there any anything that was making you seem high risk, or was it pretty smooth sailing?
So this was my first pregnancy. Hadn't had any like miscarriages or abortions. Yeah, I was pretty low risk actually, other than the PCOS, but that wasn't really an issue. I didn't need to see a doctor or anything because I was pregnant. Later on in the pregnancy, I did develop protein in my wee, which can be a sign of preeclampsia, which is a blood pressure problem. But my blood pressure never went up. So that was really lucky that it was just, they decided it was an idiopathic. So kind of, they didn't really know what the cause was, but there was protein in my wee.
Yeah. And then how were you feeling going through your pregnancy? Were there any senses of anxiety being a midwife, knowing everything you know? How were you coping emotionally?
I think I really recognized that I wanted that additional support around me. So I was seeing someone who I'd worked on the home birth team with came and did some private hypnobirthing classes for me. Because of course, during COVID, if you wanted to go to an antenatal class, they didn't even exist then. Like we were fully in lockdown. It was a really odd time to become a mum for the first time.
Yeah, I bet.
So all of these things that had been available, and I'd always thought I'd go to, like pregnancy yoga and that kind of thing, they weren't available. But I guess I was really lucky that I did have midwives who were friends who were able to guide me through things. So like somebody sent me a PDF with like some basic pregnancy yoga exercises to do every morning. And the hypnobirthing was amazing for really just turning down that anxiety level. Because, pregnancy is one of those times where you can feel quite anxious about lots of things, even if things are quite straightforward. And I think I do remember that.
Because I can imagine being a midwife, you don't need to really learn the stuff because you know it, right? So it's just like, how do you learn the relaxation stuff? Were there any particular courses that you did, or was it just listening to the tracks, or what specifically did you love about the hypnobirthing?
I thought for me, it was a really nice way to get my partner involved. I don't really know what it was. He didn't really want to do much learning, which I'd seen so many amazing partners actually throughout my time as a midwife. Even couples that would come in labor and they'd be like, oh yeah, we met and then conceived a baby straight away. And I'd be like, oh my God, you guys are so perfect together. And I know that's just like a little glimpse into people, isn't it? But I was thinking like, hey, why is my partner not adoring me and loving me the way I've seen all of these guys do? And I think it's probably just because I had quite high expectations and he was a bit uncertain about what his role was going to look like and how this change might affect him.
Yeah.
So it was really nice that we had one-to-one hypnobirthing. That was like a private course we did at home.
Oh, cool.
And that kind of guided him through the steps without me having to explain like what's normal and what isn't physiologically in labor, and things that we could be doing to support labor to start and, pain relief things.
Can you then talk us through, you've booked the private midwife. What are the next steps ahead of the birth? Like assuming it's lockdown and things like that. I know now that a private midwife or even the NHS had come to your home, they'd speak to you, you'd run through all the kind of risks or what if anything happens and when to go to hospital and check in the house and all that. What did you do then?
So luckily I already knew so many of those fact bits.
Yeah.
So I think we just did a lot of talking about like, really being able to let your guard down. Because so much of labor is controlled by the subconscious. So like you were saying, like I listened to my hypnobirthing tracks every day. I think we bought a birth pool secondhand on Facebook Marketplace and we did like a trial run of setting that up. And I'd only just finished renovating my house and we got like big bifold doors, but we didn't have curtains for them. So that was something I was like really fixated on. It's like, how do I make sure that no one can see through my bifold doors when I'm in labor? I didn't care in the end. I didn't get anything sorted, but it was fine.
I can see the desire to want to sort it.
So yeah, I think it was mainly just like practical preparation steps. I also did I made a bit of a birth altar. So I put some birth affirmations on one of those peg boards that were really popular in 2020.
Nice.
And I think it said like, I am safe, supported and cared for, which really puts testament to the fact that I was really putting so much faith into my independent midwives and allowing myself to like turn that part of my midwife brain off.
So when you booked them, do you get two or do you get one?
You get two.
That's
So
quite
yeah,
good.
I got one midwife who was my like allocated midwife, and then I got to know the second midwife during the end of my pregnancy because I only booked them at like 34 weeks.
Is that pretty stock standard that you always get two?
Yeah, so I always work with a second
Yeah.
midwife. I
And
think
why
there
is
can be
that?
variation, but it's just generally it's seen as safer. I prefer having another midwife to bounce things off.
Yeah.
And obviously, once the baby's there, you have two people that you're responsible for the health of. So having somebody that can support mum and somebody that can support baby if it was needed is a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. And then do you want to talk us through your first signs of labor?
Yeah. So I had got 40 weeks and I guess 40 weeks and 3 days. It was a weekend and me and my husband decided to go for a big walk on the coast path, which was nice. I walked up loads of steps that day. And I remember someone walking past me on like one of these steep steps section saying like, "Oh, when's the baby due?" And I was like, 3 days ago. Um, and I was like super determined to get to a certain point. And my husband was like, "Wow, you need to slow down a bit." And I think maybe I was just doing everything I could to ignore the kind of achy sensations because, you know, the end of pregnancy can be quite uncomfortable. Your bump's pretty big by then.
Mm.
But I think I was probably just ignoring the fact I was having some like quite regular period crampy sensations. And then I had a major craving on the way home from this walk for macaroni cheese and garlic bread.
Delish.
So we stopped off at the supermarket, grabbed my carb loading bits, and went home and I think we'd like watched a funny movie and ate the food. And then I went to bed and then I woke up for like my middle of the night wee that I always had in pregnancy. And once I'd finished weeing, I suddenly felt another gush of fluid. And I looked down and there was yeah, like loads of my waters had gone and they were like pink and clear. So I thought, you know what? I am not going to tell my midwives right now. I'll just be waking them up and I'm not having any contractions, really. So I told my husband and I popped a pad on. And then we'd actually been sleeping in separate beds because I'd been moving around so much in pregnancy, but I just got back into our normal bed with him. And he put the Harry Potter audiobook on with Stephen Fry's lovely dulcet tones reading to you. And we just kind of lay there and drifted in and out of sleep. And my contractions started to come during that. But I was just like ignoring them. I think maybe first thing in the morning, my husband let my mum know what was happening. She lived like 2.5 hours away. So she set off to come. And then he went down, I think, and started like setting up the pool because it was clear things were going to happen. And I guess we told our midwives too. I don't really remember that part of it because I really just stayed in my bedroom. And at some point, I must have moved from being in the bed on my side to being on all fours because that's kind of where I remember a lot of the labor happening. I was like on all fours over the bed.
So I have a question about the logistics of this all. Do you just cover the room in drop sheets?
I don't think I covered the room in anything in my bedroom. I might have had a couple of puppy pads underneath me and I was wearing lots of pads, but like it's amazing how much water can come out.
Yeah, because I put which I would actually advise anyone if their waters leak slowly just forever. I just put an adult nappy on.
Yeah,
so that I could
nappies for the win.
So I could then just like, because pads, I don't know, they're a bit of a faff, aren't they? You got to pull them out, they roll up, it's not as comfortable as this, incontinence nappy, I feel. But yeah, I just wondered the logistics of the house. So like, had you set the pool up at that point?
I really left it all up to my husband, but he set the pool up. We had hard floors all the way through downstairs. I think we bought a couple of like shower curtains or tarpaulins to put on the soft furnishings. And we had a big stack of puppy pads. Yeah, people often, when they're preparing for a home birth, they kind of ask me like, "Oh my God, isn't it going to be messy? And what about all the blood?" And actually, it hadn't occurred to me that there would be any mess, really, when I was preparing. I guess I'd seen so many, and I'd actually done a couple of home births as a midwife in perfectly white apartments, and we'd left them looking perfectly white. So I was quite confident that birth wasn't going to be too messy.
Okay. So how were you feeling in those early labor stages? Were your contractions like super frequent or were they, how was the pain and all of that for you?
I was feeling really good. I was pleased it was all happening. Because I was 4 days over by this point.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how those 4 days psychologically, I knew that like most first time babies, if left up to themselves, would come at 41 weeks. And I came 16 days over my due date. So I was really expecting a long overdue baby. But those 4 days were really tricky in my mind. The contractions, I think I was just dealing with them. I must have at some point put a TENS machine on. Maybe my husband had put that on for me, and I was using that. I was using my hypnobirthing breathing, listening to Harry Potter in the background. Good thing it's such a long audiobook.
So is he with you for most of it, or will you kind of like get away and you sort the other stuff and leave me to it?
I think he had gone downstairs to sort most of the other stuff out and would come back and check on me, which was totally fine with me. I quite like to go in on myself when I'm dealing with stuff.
Yeah. And so at what point did you start to feel it ramp up? Or at any point are you kind of going, okay, my waters are broken, I'm kind of on the clock? Were you thinking about being on a clock, or like, was your head in midwife brain or not?
At that point, absolutely not, which is amazing. I think with both of my births, once I'd finally tipped into the going into labor stage, I was really able to not monitor what was happening myself. I was really just like present in the moment, eyes closed, breathing through whatever was going on and not really analyzing it too much.
Yeah.
Which was great. I can remember my mum arriving. So that must have been maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock. That she arrived. So I'd been in labor. My waters had gone at 3 a.m. and I guess my husband had got up at maybe 6 or 7. So I'd probably done like 2 or 3, 4 hours of contractions, kind of alone in my bedroom, just hanging out. And I think she sat with me for a little bit and she was like, I think we should go downstairs. So I just, trusted her and kind of walked downstairs because it hadn't really occurred to me to move. I wasn't looking for anything different. I was quite comfortable with like the comfort measures that I had.
Yeah. And what happened when you went downstairs?
I went down the stairs and I think things ramped up a notch again. So at that point, they called my independent midwife, who sent the backup midwife who happened to live around the corner from me. And she popped over. And I think she didn't offer me, or she might have offered me a vaginal examination, but I didn't want one. I was feeling pretty good. And I think she was about to say like, oh, well, it's your first baby. It'll probably be a little while yet. And I remember her starting to say this and me being like, no, you can't say that. Don't go. And then things must have just really like picked up with my contractions, because I don't remember being able to properly verbalize it. But I think she twigged like, hang on, things are really picking up here now. I'm actually going to stay and I'm going to call the other midwife. And at that point, I was like on all fours next to the birth pool, but not in it. And I think by this point, I'd probably started to vomit between lots of my contractions, which was quite a theme for me. I think I'd moved into like the middle stage of labor and really was vomiting after every contraction.
Is that quite normal, or?
It can be, yeah. Lots of people seem to vomit in labor.
How unsettling was that for you, or you kind of like just do it?
I was just doing it. I just so wasn't analyzing. I was just like, okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And I guess the hypnobirthing was working really well for me. When you've got like food poisoning or something and you're sat there thinking like, oh, I feel so rubbish, vomit again. Oh, this is so awful. I wish it would stop. I wasn't thinking that at all. I was genuinely just there, like present in the moment. So I think all of that hypnobirthing practice where I'd listen to the track every day, having a nap had really, really worked for me to just drop into that space.
What was your mum doing at this point? Is she just like helping your husband out, or is she there as your birth partner offering like support? And
yeah, she was there with me. She was like feeding me ice chips and encouraging me to sip water. And as things ramped up, I had kind of lost the ability to press the button on the TENS machine every time I got a contraction to like change it onto a boost setting. So I think they took the mickey out of me afterwards because I kept going boost at the start of every contraction, and someone would have to scuttle over and find the TENS machine and press the button for me.
It's quite hard to know how to do it at the right time, isn't it? Like, and it's tricky to figure it out yourself as you're in that moment.
Yes, definitely. It's really nice having someone else that can monitor that for you.
Did you have any desire at any point to go like, oh, I could just have a cheeky feel to see how like dilated I am? Or were you just like, no?
I did that throughout my pregnancy. I was like, oh, I think I remember saying at one point to my midwife, like, my cervix feels like it's a bit open, but I'm not 37 weeks yet. Like, is that an issue? And she was like, just stop feeling.
Yeah.
So I think I did. And I'd completely switched the midwife brain off. I did not check what was happening.
Yeah.
And I don't think my midwives particularly pushed it. They could obviously see from all the external signs that labour was progressing nicely.
I feel like the beauty of a home birth midwife as well is like you're not on a hospital clock as such, and they know that the mother at home, I guess, wants to have the most hands-off approach she can.
Yeah. Oh, and they knew me, right? So they knew what was normal for me, what wasn't, how I looked, that they knew my birth preferences already because we already had such a deep relationship from them coming over and sitting and having a cup of tea with me for an hour or two once a week from 34 weeks. So yeah, it was incredible that relationship and just knowing that I could release and give the responsibility to them, which I guess is what lots of mums feel like in labour anyway, once they've got their professional with them or they're in the hospital. But as a midwife and someone who had been an expert, I needed to be able to give that to them. And they were able to take that. So that was great.
So at what point did you feel like transition was happening?
I don't remember having transition. It all kind of went quite fast at the end. I think I ended up having my baby at about 2 p.m. So I had maybe 7-8 hours of contractions, which is a pretty speedy labour for your first baby. I think probably at some point, the first midwife who had come, who was my backup midwife, she had disappeared because it was Halloween and she was hosting a Halloween party for her friends and neighbours. So she went back and did that with her kids for an hour or two before getting called back by my first midwife. Not that I knew that at the time. I was completely oblivious to what was happening. And I was suggested to me, maybe you'd like to get into the pool right now. And I was like, okay, yeah. I hadn't been looking for additional sources of pain relief. I was just genuinely just in the moment, not really analysing it, not thinking that this is too much. Maybe because I knew that I could do this. My midwife had told me, And so yeah, I got into the pool and that felt amazing. Just that feeling of being held in the warm water. I'm a real water person anyway, so it worked really well for me. I think unbeknownst to me though, the top ring of the pool had a bit of a slow puncture. So over the time that it had been up, it was deflating slightly. And when you look back at the pictures, it's a bit wonky. But yeah, luckily I didn't know that at the time. And then I think just that kind of movement maybe, or just the feeling of even further being able to relax and feeling held and warm in the pool, I just started naturally pushing at the height of every contraction. But yeah, maybe one of the biggest things that surprised me was some people love pushing and I thought maybe I'd really like it, but I wasn't disliking contractions and I didn't want to be actively doing anything. It just felt like that feeling of retching or being sick, but out of my bum. Every time I got to the top of a contraction, I'd be like, I can feel it so vividly now thinking about it. It hurt. And I really didn't want that to happen. And then I'd have to keep reframing it in my mind, being like, no, I want more of these.
Yeah. You realize why you're here.
Yeah. You can't stop this now. It's going.
But also helpful that your body was involuntarily making you do that, because it was lovely that you didn't have to be coached or that you could feel it and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. I'm just so glad that things had gone so smoothly up until that point.
So how long was the pushing phase for you?
Oh, I don't know exactly. I think maybe half an hour. It really wasn't so long, which was lucky because it really wasn't my favourite part of it.
At the point of crowning, how did you feel in that moment? It sounds like you dealt with contractions really well. So did you find crowning challenging or?
Yeah, I just remember thinking this hurts. I don't like this. This hurts. But I had amazing support around me. who kept reminding me of like funny phrases like floppy face, floppy fanny. And I remember like shouting out affirmations to myself, being like, I am so stretchy. And like, Lucy, Lucy. I think just remembering that I'd really tried to tell myself not to resist it and just to like relax my pelvic floor.
Mm.
So yeah, I guess I just carried on pushing her out, my body just naturally pushing her out. Obviously it takes a lot of effort from you, but you're just like following the urge that my body was saying. And yeah, her head came out, and I remember thinking like, this is taking ages. Where's the rest of her? Just there, like I was actually sat in a really strange position in the pool, and I had like one leg tucked underneath me and one leg stretched out to the other side, so really asymmetrical. And I think my midwife suggested that I moved because my bum was effectively like on the base of the pool. And I remember thinking like, no, there is no way I could move from this position. And actually, it really shows kind of the next part of her birth really shows maybe what was happening, because we got like the next contraction eventually came. I'm sure it was a normal amount of time, but I was surprised at how long it was. And I know this because I've got a really good birth video, which I now show everybody, like friends, not clients. When I'm drinking, I'm like, look at my birth. And you can see this moment where I just like look up at my midwife and I'm like, help me. Because I think I realized she wasn't just slipping out. And I thought my midwife brain was telling me like, her shoulders are stuck, there's something wrong. But actually what had happened was that she was a compound presentation. So her hand was by her face. And I'd managed as a first-time mum to push out a baby that had a hand by her face. And her head was a really good size as well. So I'm quite impressed with my pelvis. But she just needed a little bit of like adjustment to help herself move through, or maybe I needed to change position a little bit at that point. So yeah, I think my midwife reached down to kind of guide her out, but actually she kind of came at that point anyway. And we brought her to the surface and held her, and we didn't know at that point that she was a girl. So yeah, I think we were like just super shocked to find that out. So yeah, I just held her, and my husband's reaction was just incredible. He was so pleased. It was like the first time I'd ever seen him cry.
Aww.
Yeah, it was really good. It was like the perfect birth.
Yeah. Did you have all of those kind of feelings of oxytocin rushing through you? And
yeah, absolutely. Like the picture to my face is just like beaming and like bright-eyed. But I do remember my internal thought being like, my ass hurts. Like my bum really, really hurts at this point. And just completely shocked at how much my bum hurt.
do you mean your bum hole?
Yeah, my actual bum hole was like burning and sore. And actually, possibly what it was, I had like a 2nd-degree tear. So I think I could probably just feel the pain there, but I was interpreting it being in my bum hole.
Okay. So kind of a bit of pain towards the end. How was your placental delivery?
That was all good. Yeah. I didn't want to stay in the birth pool for that. I just like in my midwife brain, I didn't really like that as a concept.
Yeah.
So I got out, and they'd brought around like a birth stool. So I sat on a little birth stool holding my baby. And I was just happy to wait for my placenta to come naturally. I didn't want the injection unless I was bleeding, and everything looked fine. So yeah, they like wrapped me and my baby up, made sure we were nice and warm. And I just like sat there with a dressing gown around me, waiting for it to come. And then I can't quite remember how it exactly came out. But yeah, at some point it just kind of flopped out. I think maybe I went and lay down, and at that point it came out. And then just kind of lay there with my new baby and my placenta in a bowl next to me. And she was still attached by the cord at that point to the placenta.
Yeah. Did you leave that attached as long as possible, or what were you doing there?
Yeah, we cut it maybe like half an hour after that, once she'd had a feed.
Yeah.
And
were you excited to look at the placenta, like being a midwife? For you?
Yeah. I like really wanted my husband to look at it too, and he was a bit like, oh no, this is a bit icky. But we kept it because in my mind I was like, maybe I want to eat it. I didn't really want to turn it into capsules or anything. Some people dry it and turn it into capsules, but I was a bit like, just instinctively doesn't seem like the right thing to do, to keep taking your placental hormones, even though some people say that it's amazing. It just wasn't for me. And I'd looked after a couple of clients who had chucked a chunk or two in a smoothie, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll do that. But then, yeah, it just sat in my fridge for a couple of days. A couple of days is way better than my second placenta, which stayed for 16 months in my freezer. It was quite an icky thing to see. Yeah, we eventually, a couple of weeks after the birth, I think we burned it on a bonfire in our garden, which felt like it was just like me and my husband, and it felt like a really nice thing to do. I sang it a little song that I'd sung at my mother blessing that my independent midwives had held for me, which was another just incredibly special thing. I got together some other midwives from the area that we knew, and yeah, they gave me like a mother blessing, which was the perfect initiation into motherhood in this time when you actually couldn't do very much that was sociable.
You had such a lovely network around you. How were you feeling post-birth with like the tear and all of that? Was that easy to stitch up?
Yeah, an interesting thing that had happened actually is I didn't have any gas and air for when they were stitching the tear, because we had the log burner going, and obviously gas and air is combustible, so you really shouldn't have it in the same room as a fire. Hadn't prepped my husband with that, hadn't even occurred to me that he'd have put the log burner on, but I gave birth with the birth pool like next to the fire. It was really cute and lovely looking, like great playlist on. I'd curated the perfect birth playlist, but we couldn't have the gas and air. So I remember really having to do the hypnobirthing breathing as they put like local anesthetic into my perineum. And I did want it stitched, so they did stitch it together. Yeah, and then I just kind of sat there and held my baby and beamed, looking super happy with myself.
And how was that first golden hour with her and breastfeeding?
Yeah, I mean, I would think I was really lucky. She was awake and alert. She just had these like huge big eyes. She was just like looking up at me, and I really knew, like, positioning wise, I was just so lucky that I already knew about breastfeeding, so I was able to get that first latch quite well. And she went on fine and had a good feed, and then I think she got her first daddy cuddle at that point. And you know, she had probably weighed and had vitamin K after that first hour as well.
Yeah. And then how was your postpartum with her in those kind of early few days when your hormones are all over the place and your milk's coming in?
The first morning, so we went to bed, and I tried to lie her down in her little next to me crib. And I think my mum came and like tucked me in and put her down, and everything in my body was like, you can't sleep with your baby not near you. And you know, she was within touching distance. She was in a next to me crib, but I remember I'm like, actually no, I can't sleep if she's there. So I think I actually brought her into my bed on that first night, which isn't a bad thing. It had just, you know, I'd bought a cot, and I thought, as all health professionals do, that I would do the recommended advice, which is to have your baby flat on their back in their crib. But all of my mummy instincts were just saying, like, no, have your baby really close. So I did, and that worked really well for me. And I woke up the next morning, and I was genuinely have never had such a high in my life. I felt incredible. So I got up and left my husband in bed with the baby, and my mum, and I went downstairs and started trying to clean my kitchen, which I 100% would not do. I'm not like a neat and tidy person. I don't get kicks from cleaning, but I was just on this really strange high and just felt so energetic. I think I really learned from that the second time and did not do that. I really rested intentionally, but the first time I hadn't really prepared for my postpartum period in the same way.
Do you want to talk us through? You have another birth to share with us. So should we start off by then getting into that, and how was your journey to conception with your second baby?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. So she was, I think I came home from work one day, and at that point I was working as a research midwife. So I used to support like clinical research that was happening across the Southwest Peninsula, so like Devon and Cornwall, basically. And I was like, I really would like another maternity leave. So my husband was like, yeah, okay. We were living in a rented house at the time. We were about to purchase a house that we were going to renovate. It was like a little bit up in the air, but our daughter had just turned 2 and had probably just got to that like slightly easier stage. She was really vocal and talkative. So he agreed, and we tried once and found out I was pregnant, which was like just incredible because I had never, like I said, I had PCOS and I had never imagined that would be my story.
Mm. How were you feeling in those first kind of few months of pregnancy?
Little bit sick. So, but yeah, I didn't say in the first pregnancy, I also just had like, normal pregnancy nausea, little bit of vomiting, but nothing too crazy. Since then, I've done loads of research. I've supported a couple of clients who have had hyperemesis or quite severe sickness. And I've done further training in complementary therapies. And there are loads of other things that I would do that aren't just like eating ginger biscuits. Yeah. And getting enough sleep. Now, like there's so much more that I would try if I was suffering from pregnancy nausea.
Do you want to tell us a few of those things for anyone listening who might be thinking this is me right now?
Yeah, for sure. So definitely things like trying acupuncture, because there's loads of evidence to show that can help, or even just using acupressure. So the C bands that you can buy, like pregnancy pressure bands, they go around your wrist. And if you place them correctly, they can be very effective at relieving early pregnancy nausea. I'd focus a lot more on my nutrition status, especially pre-pregnancy. Look at eating enough protein in pregnancy and really prioritizing that. Staying hydrated with electrolytes. I mean, there's just so much stuff that you can do. I'd also try, rather than taking ginger biscuits, I'd try like fresh ginger or even crystallized ginger, although that's quite high in sugar. Something like that can work well for people. Try aromatherapy. So I'm trained in aromatherapy now. There's lots of evidence that things like lemon is very, very good. So even like cutting up half a lemon and sniffing that can be very helpful. I did none of that in my first and second pregnancy. Not quite sure why. I'd spent lots of time supporting pregnant women, but I just followed all the conventional guidance at that point.
Yeah. So how are you feeling second pregnancy overall as you come into your third trimester, aside from that?
What was interesting with my care is that early in the pregnancy, I tried to refer myself to the local midwives. I'd moved area. I wasn't somewhere that I'd worked clinically as a midwife when I'd moved to Cornwall. And I did like their self-referral system, and I didn't get a response. And then I tried again like 2 weeks later, like my pregnancy progressing. So I probably tried at like 5 weeks, referred again at 7 weeks. And I got to like nearly 9 weeks. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like, why is nobody getting back to me? I've done 3 referrals. And I actually booked a meeting with like a local ex-midwife who had become like a birth keeper and specialized in Freebirth, just because I was like, is this a sign that I'm not meant to have any pregnancy care? But my conversation with her was really helpful because it helped me clarify, like, I'm a midwife and I really value pregnancy care. And, I've seen what can happen if you don't have care, even when you are a very well-informed and healthy human being. Like sometimes pregnancy just does wild things. So she actually contacted her old colleague on my behalf, who explained that actually there had just been like a bit of an issue with the system. They were reorganizing the boundaries of where their community teams were, and there wasn't a midwife covering the surgery that I was referring from.
Slightly lost in the system, but you got there in the end.
A little bit lost in the system, which didn't fill me with faith at that point. And I think I managed to like circumvent a little bit of what people would get in the normal system, because I was again caseloaded by a midwife. I still had to go to I had to drive half an hour to the community clinic she ran, but she was really kind enough to say that like I could see her throughout the pregnancy, which felt very reassuring to me. And there weren't any independent midwives in Cornwall at the time until I set up. So it wasn't an option for me to have an independent midwife the second time round.
Okay.
And that upset me.
Oh, I can imagine, because you had such a positive experience. So what did you do then?
So I just carried on. Like I saw her for my appointments, and, she was a great midwife, but she was definitely had her hands tied by the system, because I think what I noticed both times is that I wanted someone who was like wise and could challenge me and help me work out what was really right for me, listening to my intuition. And I guess reflecting on my second pregnancy, we got to say, like, talking about being overdue. It was very much like I was presented with the evidence, which was great. The recommendation is it had changed. You get induced at 41 weeks now. And I needed someone, which is what I would do now and what my independent midwives did, who was really able to help me work out where it was like a fawn response, where it was triggering that like good girl in me. Because I was so worried about being perceived as like a bit of a rebel by also being a midwife, but not necessarily taking the medically normal approach. So like I had agreed, sorry, not quite the question that you asked me. Like I agreed for things like having stretch and sweeps, and she came and did them at my house. It was great. It was someone I'd had the whole pregnancy. She was really nice, but having a stretch and sweep felt really traumatic and invasive to me. Even as someone without a history of any kind of trauma, it was just, I can still remember now how uncomfortable that felt.
Yeah.
And it didn't reassure me that my body was doing the right thing.
Okay. So then, as you're approaching the end of your pregnancy, what were you thinking in terms of, are you then planning on still having a home birth through the NHS?
Yeah. So I was just planning to have a home birth through the NHS. She said she would try and come to my home birth if she found out that I was in labour. I think she might put herself on some extra on-calls for me, or, put a note next to me saying she would. But unfortunately, because I went to 41 weeks, I think she was on annual leave, or she just wasn't available when I eventually went into labour. And actually, it was still like quite a different system, because to let the hospital know that I was in labour and needed a midwife, I still had to phone antenatal triage, like the main maternity phone line. So it was all a little bit, I guess I didn't get that comfort and reassurance and guidance that it was going to be someone that I knew and trusted for sure. Maybe inside I knew that she wasn't going to be there. I don't know. I don't know how much your intuition can guide you about that kind of thing. It's just something I'm learning about now,
Yeah. So what were your first signs of labour then?
So, what, interestingly, the same thing is that the stretch and sweeps both times. So like I had one at like just over 40 weeks and one halfway through the 40th week. Both times I had like a really stretchy cervix, stretching to about 4 centimeters. So I was walking around and I was like, if I was in labor right now having contractions, they'd admit me to labor ward if I'm 4 centimeters. And I was just like walking around, walking my dog, feeling pretty grumpy. I was definitely not my best self. My mum came down to stay with me again, which was really nice because I now had my nearly 3-year-old, and my husband was there. So yeah, I was just like super grumpy and had loads of period cramps again, but not really thinking anything of it. And then my mum was working and my husband was working. I was looking after my 3-year-old, sat on the sofa, and my waters went. Luckily, not quite all over the sofa. Then I managed to catch it in my trousers, mostly. Cute. But at this time, there was meconium in my waters. So the baby had done a poo inside, and my waters were green, like just light green. But I knew as a midwife, like, okay, this is what it is.
Can you just talk us through how, on a scale of like 1 to 10, how bad is meconium in the waters during labour at that stage? Like, what would they do if you're in hospital, or like, what is the recommendation to do?
So I think it's really got to be contextualized in, it's really, really common in babies who go over their due date that we think maybe their bowel just gets so full that they release some poo into their waters around them. And often that you can tell that it's been there a little while. It's not fresh because it's not like blobby. It's had lots of time to kind of dilute and turn all the waters like a nice greeny yellow color, as opposed to like having blobs of poo, like that black sticky tar poo floating around in it. The worry can be that if your baby has actually been subject to lots of stress, they would also open their bowel.
Okay.
So if they're not coping with labour, they might open their bowel and pass some poo into the waters, and that could then be a sign of stress.
Okay.
The other thing is that having meconium in the waters increases the chance of infection.
Okay.
Um,
For mum and baby or just baby?
I think just for baby, but don't quote me on that one.
Yeah. Okay. So then what were you thinking at that point?
So I knew I needed to speak to someone. So I phoned antenatal triage, and it was really hard because they had no idea who I was. So I explained, I'm Katie, I'm 41 weeks, I've had a straightforward home birth before and I'm booked for home birth this time. And my waters have gone, there's light meconium in it. And that I was a midwife.
Key.
And she just, it felt really condescending, the conversation I had with her. There was like no understanding or flexibility there. I think the whole upshot of the conversation was just like, okay, well, that's against guidelines now, so you need to come into the hospital to check that your baby's okay. And I just remember thinking like, oh, that wasn't the plan. What do I do here? It's absolutely not what I want to do, to go into the hospital right now. Like, my baby's moving around like normal. And I think I really wanted a midwife just to come and check me over. And I think I remember saying to her, like, surely if you think I'm now high risk because there's poo in the baby's water, surely you should come and support me. Like, if my baby's at more risk, come and assess my baby at this point at home, because I don't want to come into the hospital. There was like no flexibility there. And that, I felt really unsupported.
Yeah.
And they didn't know me, right? Like, they didn't know I was a midwife, and she just sounded like she didn't believe me, which is, that's maybe something I've recognized in other professionals, that we're not very good at letting women be the experts in their own body, or recognizing the experience that people can bring to things if we don't know them already.
Yeah. So at that point, you've had that deflating conversation.
I was booked in to have acupuncture that afternoon anyway. So I've been having regular acupuncture throughout my pregnancy. So I had turned up to my acupuncturist with like a big puppy pad between my legs. And I don't think I ever actively made the choice, like, I am not going to triage. It just like, I wouldn't have been able to do that because I've got this good girl complex, or had this good girl complex that I was trying to work on. So it was more of like a passive, like, well, I'm not going right now. So I went to my acupuncture appointment, and she did all the acupuncture that she'd been doing. And I listened to my hypnobirthing tracks that I'd used the first time round. I'd continue to use those in my second pregnancy. And just hoped that things would kick off. My mum had taken me to the acupuncture, and my eldest dad was looking after her, the same dad for both children. And but he'd let her have a late nap, which, she's nearly 3. Having a nap, in a late afternoon nap, it's not good at that age.
Foolish.
And I'm always going to remember that. And and so we spent a nice long afternoon with her there. She was awake. I remember, like, we ate some dinner. I requested macaroni and cheese again, because in my mind I was like, this is going to make me go into labour.
Exact same environment.
Yeah, did not. It was a terrible macaroni cheese, like the shop bought thin, nasty kind. It wasn't the Tesco finest that I bought the first time round. Gutted. But, my eldest stayed up really late. We were watching Chitty Bang Bang. I don't know why that was the film this time. And eventually we got her to bed at like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And I got into the bath, and I was alone for the first time that day. I put on an audiobook. So I think Michelle Obama's autobiography. I was like halfway through it.
It's great.
It's great. And I'd like turn the lights down. Maybe I had like some clary sage or something. And I just switched off and really listened. And it was a great part of the book, right, where Michelle and Barack are meeting for the first time and talking about like their marriage and stuff. And I guess I just switched off from my body. Like, I've got a really overthinky brain and really like analysey brain. So I needed to be able to drop into another story, I think. And I didn't really register that I was having contractions at this point. And then my mum came upstairs and like, you've been in the bath for an hour or two. Is everything okay? And then she was like, oh, you are having lots of contractions now, Katie. Like, I think we should call the midwives. So she went, yeah, she rang the midwives at that point, and my husband started setting up a birth pool downstairs because she told him like, oh yeah, she's having contractions now. Because I've not really had many signs during the day. Nothing had particularly changed from the generalized discomfort I was feeling in my tummy anyway, and I'd continued to leak some green waters. And then she put the phone down, and I think within a minute or two, I had then switched into that like pushing mode. So same thing again, like my body just like bearing down. And I think I said to my mum, like, I think you should call an ambulance. And at this point, my husband's up there too. And I remember them both looking at each other and being like, no, I don't think we need to do that. Like, you're fine, which was really great in terms of like their belief in my ability to do this. They'd both been there before and they'd seen it. But also it's as a medical professional, if there's nobody else there, I would always advise someone to call an ambulance. So, I wasn't in the right space to be like telling them like, no, you probably should call an ambulance. Like my baby's done a poo in the waters and there's not going to be anyone there. But I also didn't fight it, maybe because I knew that I would probably be able to sort anything out that needed to. I wasn't thinking rationally. But I was just like, okay, cool, we'll just carry on with this. But I've got quite a small bath. It's quite a deep bath, but it's quite short. I'm short as well, but I was like basically stuck on my side in the bath, and I'm pushing this baby out, and I'm feeling like I really need to be able to move, but I just cannot move. And my mum managed to climb in. It's like a freestanding bath, so she climbed into like the little corner edge that wasn't attached to the wall and stood there and like held my leg for me a bit, which I'm not sure I wanted or not, but you don't really need your legs to be open to give birth to a baby, but she held it for me. And the first time I'd had this really beautiful birth video that someone had taken, maybe the second midwife. And this time round, I've just got a video that mainly I think was being used for the torch. So you can just see bits of my poo in the bath. It just like zooms down, looks at like the bottom of the bath and maybe my legs swinging around there, and then kind of goes up and then goes down. There's no lovely background music this time because I'd been listening to Michelle Obama and that had stopped because Mum had phoned the midwives on my phone.
No log burner.
No log burner. No. So there was a candle.
But you got a piece of poo.
We got some pictures of poo, yeah. So, like just little flecks floating around in the bath. And then I think at some point, I'm just thinking a lot of this comes from watching the video back as well, rather than necessarily my own memory. My mum goes like, Katie, there's some blood. And at that point, I just sound like a normal midwife. I'm like, that's okay. That's just because everything's stretching. And, like exactly as a midwife would do. And then, yeah, I just like pushed her out in the bath. And
Wow.
brought her to the surface, and she was great, like happy little baby covered in vernix, that like sticky white stuff that happens to babies inside. So she obviously wasn't too overcooked. At 41 weeks she'd been born perfectly at the right time for her, and yeah, she was really happy, no concerns about her at all.
So wow, I mean, was that a lot quicker than your first birth? Because for those who haven't heard, yeah,
that was like maybe 2.5 hours from the first contraction.
Yeah. So your mum must have heard you, because when she called out to you and said like you've been in there a while, she could obviously really tell that those contractions were picking up.
I think so, yeah. I think I was probably kind of mooing through them. I'm quite a vocal person anyway. I like singing, and I think I was probably going through each contraction. Sorry,
with Michelle Obama
sound effects there.
With Michelle Obama.
Yeah,
drones in the background. So question. So do they when you have a home birth, do they do like an APGAR score and stuff like that? Or
yeah. So exactly the same care that you would get in the hospital, minus any fancy machines.
Okay.
Although like midwives do bring a lot of kit with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, they do an APGAR score in exactly the same way.
Yeah. So was she on you for quite a while, and like placenta, how'd that all happen?
Yeah, so she was on me, she was like cuddling, and then at some point I thought, oh, it's getting a bit chilly in here, I should get out and kind of midwife braid a bit, having to midwife myself at this point because they hadn't arrived. Thought, oh, I'll sit on the toilet, see if I can do a wee and get the placenta to come. It didn't want to come. And then I guess I wandered across the hall. So one side of the hall is where my 3-year-old was asleep, or like nearly 3-year-old, and she slept through the whole thing, which is amazing. So I wandered across the other side of the corridor and got into my bed, probably loads of sheets and blankets and stuff put down, with my baby attached by the cord and the placenta that stood inside me. And I just lay there all snuggled up, loving my baby. And at some point, the midwives arrived. So I think nearly an hour after my baby was born, because we hadn't thought to ring them back to tell them I was pushing or that the baby had arrived. And it turns out they'd sent the midwives from quite far away. In Cornwall, they do it based on areas, and they had quite a high risk lady who was about to go into labour in my area. So instead of using the local midwives, they'd sent some midwives who were an hour and a bit away. So anyway, the midwives get there, and I think my husband answers the door and says, "Oh, she's upstairs." And the midwife's like, yeah, that's fine. She was like, no, the baby's upstairs. And they were like, "Oh, the baby's here." So they came up, and it was people I'd never met before, but I was quite pleased to see them. I wonder if there was something about not wanting to be seen as a complete rebel or maverick and saving my placenta for them. Because actually, my placenta was just sat there in my vagina. It was just waiting. It had detached. There were no issues. So I basically just asked them, "Please, can you just pull a little bit?" And they just lifted it out for me. So that it was all great. There was no bleeding that was particularly worrying. It was all fine. But I think at that point they didn't check my perineum to see if I needed stitches. They they were checked I was okay, and then went away and started doing some paperwork. I probably wasn't giving them the "Oh yeah, please stay here and be my besties" vibe, because I'd never met them. And they came up maybe an hour later and said, "Would you like us to check your perineum?" And again, I hadn't used any gas and air, so I've never used gas and air, despite carrying it around in my car all the time. They checked my perineum and said, "Oh, you do have a bit of a tear." But it was so uncomfortable when they were checking that part of me was a bit do I want to get stitches anyway? I'm going to have quite an intentional rest postpartum. Their evidence is a bit wishy-washy about whether you should or shouldn't suture second-degree tears. So I was just a bit no, it's fine. I'm done here. You guys can go. And so they were like, "Okay, no problem." And actually, in hindsight, the next morning, I looked at my tear with a mirror, and I was really shocked because there was a bit of skin that was coming out a little pocket. And that was going black and starting to fall off. So I sent a disappearing picture on WhatsApp to one of my friends who's a labour ward coordinator. She was like, "Yeah, I think a few hours earlier you could have gone and got that stitched back together." But it's gone now.
Yeah.
And at some point that bit of skin must have just fallen off, because it's not uneven there. It's all fine.
There's actually a really good podcast that deep dives into various different bits and bobs to do with birth that is really interesting to do with episiotomies and tearing naturally. It's called The Great Birth Rebellion. So if anyone wants to know a bit more about naturally tearing and letting it heal itself, that's a great resource to listen to.
I love The Great Birth Rebellion. I think using podcasts is an amazing source of information for pregnancy and postpartum. So yeah, I definitely rate all of the info there on The Great Birth Rebellion.
So how are you feeling second time around after this birth? Did she latch well as well? Did you know that she was a girl?
I knew that she was a girl, yeah. We'd found out the 20-week scan and announced it to everyone via our 2.5-year-old then. She told everyone on a video, which was
cute.
Nice.
And then how was your breastfeeding journey with her? Was it as good as the first time?
Yeah, so both of my kids had tongue ties. But I guess as a midwife, I recognised the signs of that early on. They didn't necessarily have the classic signs, but they were kind of smacking and kind of coming off the breast. Luckily, my nipples never developed too much trauma, which was something I was super worried about, because I'd seen so many people have really sore, crusty nipples. But I identified it early, and both of my kids had it snipped. The first time round, the independent midwife did it on our kitchen table. And the second time round, we had to go into clinic and have that done.
It's really, if anyone's wondering about that and it being like a super scary thing, I've had it done with one of my kids and it's very quick. They barely feel it. It's not traumatizing.
It's
Would
surprising, isn't it?
recommend.
Because an
Yeah.
adult, you'd think it'd be awful, but yeah, for babies, it's a really, really thin little membrane.
Yeah. So then how are you feeling emotionally second time round?
I think I was feeling really good in myself. I was very intentional. I basically stayed in my bedroom for the first week or so. My family would come up and like share meals with me around the bed. And it was just like me and my baby in this lovely bubble, and my eldest daughter would come in too, which was amazing. So I felt really good like that. But I did feel a bit lost and disappointed. I think that there was a really stark contrast between being held in a really deep relationship and being known and witnessed by midwives that I could really trust versus that second time where, you know, the system hadn't worked for me, particularly from the beginning. And I had a really good version of it. Um, you know, I haven't mentioned, I had a couple of admissions especially during my second pregnancy, but possibly during the first, because I'd had a couple of random bleeds during
Okay.
pregnancy.
Do you mean admitted to hospital?
Admit to the hospital, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had to go to triage, like an extra scan or so to find out what the bleeding was. And both times they have no idea what it was. It was probably my cervix. I've got something called an ectropion, which is, it has a little tendency to bleed. It's where the inside lining of the womb just grows to the outside.
Yeah.
So possibly could have been to do with that. But that was quite a scary thing to have happened in pregnancy. But luckily didn't make me high risk at all. We don't know why it happened.
Yeah. How did you find the midwives? The midwives that came towards the end of your birth, obviously your daughter came quite quickly and they didn't quite make it. How were they towards you when they arrived? Did you feel like they treated you any differently? Were you, happy with what happened there?
Yeah, they were really pleasant, really nice midwives, absolutely nothing to say negatively about them. I just didn't know them.
Yeah.
And they didn't know me. They didn't know my preferences. Yeah, it was interesting having to navigate like making a new relationship at the point where like I've literally just had a baby and I still have a placenta inside me. Yeah, I'm having to try and be this like polite woman almost. It's just like an interesting thing to reflect on compared to the first time where I was so held and known.
I think that's the real issue that we kind of struggle with at the moment in the NHS and just maybe generally in the UK is that continuity of care. It's so important, and so often, unless you have the ability to book and pay for a private midwife, you are not guaranteed to get it.
Exactly. It's like foundational to not just your safety, but how you experience your birth and how you experience that transition to motherhood is having that relationship. It's actually what all my postgraduate research was about, continuity and how we could make it work in the NHS. And it was something I was so passionate about as a student midwife, having done caseloading and having done an elective placement with an unusual provider of midwifery services called One-to-One Midwives in the Northwest.
Okay.
They did like proper caseloading similar to independent midwifery. And I just could see the difference that relationship made. And all of the evidence shows like, if this is a pill, it would be unethical not to give it to all women, especially women who are complex or at higher risk because of like social factors. It's like, just know your midwife. We can't do that in the NHS at the moment. That is the reason that I'm an independent midwife, is because of my own experience of continuity being just so important, even as a straightforward mum.
Yeah. Leading on to that, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do, Katie? Maybe if you're happy to, like where you're based and how, if anyone can get in touch with you, if they're listening to this and go, oh, I live in that area, you sound perfect.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I am an independent midwife. So I provide full spectrum care from preconception all the way through to about 6 weeks postnatal, including home birth care. But I do also support hospital births too. And that is based generally in Cornwall. I do also cover parts of Devon. And I do a little bit of online work. I've had a few clients that have lived between Cornwall and other places. So we've done a little bit of online support too. I also offer complementary therapy treatments for pregnancy. So to support your healthy pregnancy, using things like aromatherapy, reflexology, pregnancy massage, clinical hypnosis. And I do trauma resolution therapy for people who have had difficult births, or, difficult aspects of their birth or breastfeeding or something like that.
What does that mean exactly? Does that mean like the trauma thing? Is that like you do talking to them, or?
Yeah, so I follow a protocol called the 3-step rewind method, which uses NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming, and like a deeply gentle, relaxing treatment. It's a course of 3 treatments. You don't have to even discuss exactly what the traumatic event is if it doesn't feel like something you can discuss. And it just guides you through a way of almost unhooking your emotions from the event that happened. So instead of looking back at your baby's birth or whatever the event is and it intensely feeling those emotions, or not being able to talk about it, you can see what's happening and the emotions aren't directly there next to it. It's a really nice way to help process what's happened to you. I know a lot of clients have found it's really changed the way they felt. Often people come to me during a subsequent pregnancy because they're suddenly realizing that actually I found that a really difficult experience and I think I need to deal with that before I have another baby.
Yeah. And where can they find you then? Do you want to give us your contact details?
Yeah, sure. So I am at Katie Midwife Cornwall on Instagram, or I'm on www.katiegregorymidwife.co.uk.
We can also
my website.
We can also pop that in the show notes as well, in case people are listening and trying to scramble this down, because I know not everyone has a pen handy.
Oh, it'd be so great to chat to anyone that needs some support. I think it's invaluable. And maybe one of the best lessons that I learned from my births was investing in the right kind of support will really help you. So whether that's having like body work with an osteopath or a chiropractor or something like that, taking a hypnobirthing course, or obviously for me, having private care completely changed everything and changed my idea of what midwifery was. And led me to doing this myself because of just how impactful that was. Yeah.
Well, Katie, I normally ask people what would be their biggest piece of advice or tip to give any kind of new parent, but I feel like you've just given that. But if there's anything else that you'd like to add, like maybe, I guess I'm always so curious, right? Because I feel like some women just feel like a home birth is completely out of their reach. Be it a private midwife, maybe for like cost reasons, or maybe they've been put in the high risk category. So are there any kind of bits of advice on how you could overcome that, like who to speak to, or how to, like, say you're high risk, right? And you are given pushback and they say, no, you can't have a home birth. Like, should you challenge that? Or should you just trust your care providers that they know what's best? Or what's been your experience of that?
Yeah, so I think absolutely, just picking up on the first point that you made is that, not everybody is rich who has an independent midwife. It's something people spend like the money that they've saved up for buying a house, or money that they might have spent on part of their wedding fund. It's just about kind of prioritizing where they're spending it. And lots of my clients feel like it just makes the best sense to invest in their pregnancy and birth experience, because it's not just one day in your life. It's got such a rippling effect, and really transforms how you see yourself as a mother or a parent. And yeah, loads of people make huge changes after they've had a really great, empowering birth story, even if it isn't the straightforward home birth they might have been hoping for. We're not magic. You don't buy the great birth. There is an element of luck there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to what you said about if, you're being told you can't have something, like actually that goes against your human rights. You are allowed to make the choice that you want to make in your pregnancy, even if that's not medically advised. And that's really important to know. No one cares about your baby more than you do. So it's not silly if that's really what feels right for you with your intuition. I think if you're struggling to find support, asking for an appointment with a consultant midwife or in like a birth planning session with a senior midwife would be a really good way to go, particularly if you've got some risk factors and you'd like to plan a home birth.
Yeah.
Lots of NHS trusts also contract home births out to independent midwives. particularly for women with risk factors now.
Okay.
So
Didn't know
sometimes you might be able to request that, and it's certainly a possibility in lots of areas of the country to be cared for by an independent midwife, but it has no cost to you.
Because it does feel like a bit of a postcode lottery at the moment. I've spoken to so many mothers who have just been really lucky with doing NHS home births. Let's say they couldn't afford it and they didn't have, they didn't have even the funds to save up, and they found, they've had success in birthing through the NHS. But then there's been so many stories I've heard through friends and women on the podcast who sadly that just didn't happen on the basis of the county they're in.
Yeah, it is shocking how different NHS services are across the country. And that's something there's a really big movement and push to change at the moment, because, the rates are really variable of who gets support for home births, or what kind of services are offered, whether you get antenatal classes included, whether, there's all sorts of things. Even whether you are diagnosed with gestational diabetes is potentially different in like one hospital to its neighbour.
Yeah. Not to mention like the stays afterwards. Like I had a C-section with my first birth, and I was lucky enough to stay in hospital for 4 days for other reasons, but until I established breastfeeding. But then I had other friends who lived in the opposite side of the country who had C-sections and had to be out that night, and their husband couldn't stay, and it's just crazy the difference.
Yeah, I think sometimes knowing how to navigate the system makes a big difference as well. How to say the right things. And sometimes that's where, if there isn't an independent midwife available to you, maybe investing in a doula or even like a virtual doula. Lots of people offer services where you can just have support via WhatsApp or video call during your pregnancy. But I think having the support of someone who knows how to navigate the system makes such a difference, kind of for all parts of the NHS, not just for birth. If you've got like a parent or grandparent or a child in hospital, knowing the right things to say, it makes a huge, huge change to what happens.
Oh, Katie, you've been so insightful and so knowledgeable with all this. So thank you so much for coming on.
It has been so great to talk to you. Thank you for letting me share my stories.
And maybe we'll get you back on to talk about some of the research you've done, and maybe as we delve into other topics.
Oh, Georgia, I would love that. It'd be great.
Oh, great. See you soon.
See you soon.
I really hope you enjoyed today's story. If you enjoyed it and you'd like to hear more, please give us a follow and subscribe on wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you know any expecting mums in your life that you think might like to hear stories like this, please do share them on with her. It might be just what she's looking to listen to.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.